Right, colleagues, a sad day indeed it is. Well, we start off, before we open the meeting, can I just ask you all, if you've got your mobiles with you, please put them on mute or turn them off. And if you are given the opportunity to speak, can you speak into the microphone to make sure we all, particularly those online, can hear what you're saying. The other thing is, when you do speak, and that includes the Cabinet, do take the opportunity to say who you are, what your role is, and for the benefit of those that are watching online, and likewise any colleagues that are not on the Cabinet who speak, just say what ward you represent, your name and what ward is useful for the public to be aware. Before I open the meeting, can I just take the opportunity to thank staff for what they did last week? I mean, we had a terrible storm, and I've had feedback to me that all our staff were out there doing the job. And I think we should give great credit to all our members of our staff out there in the front line doing their thing, even in adverse weather conditions. So from me, and I'm sure you'd all agree with me, that's a great tribute to our workforce. Right, apologies, Chairman. I don't think we've got any other than Matt Prosser, who's away on holiday, isn't he? Minutes of the meeting held on the 3rd of October. Can I sign those as a true record? I'll take silence as a yes. Thank you. Declarations of interest. Anybody got any declarations of interest? Okay. Public participation. We've got a number of people wishing to speak. One person, David Sarsens, is here in person. There's a number of people that are joining us virtually. They're all to do with agenda item 7. What I would say we've had an unprecedented number of emails on this particular subject, as well as statements, which will not be read out today, but they'll be contained in the minutes when they're published. All I would say to those that wish to speak, fine, but we have all read them, so try and abridge what you're going to say to around any additional things you feel we ought to be aware of, so that we'll make a decision when we get to agenda item 7. So the first speaker is David Sarsens.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everybody, and thank you for inviting me here today. As Mayor of Lyme Regis, I am conveying the Lyme Regis Town Council's strong support of the recommendation from the Place and Resource Overview Committee to include in the dog-related PSPO the requirement for dogs to be kept on a lead on Lyme Regis Front Town Beach during the winter. The Town Council wanted to see a total ban on dogs on Lyme's front beaches all year round, a view we shared with Dorset Council, but unfortunately has not been taken into consideration. This was not one of the options in the questionnaire, and we have serious concerns about the integrity of the consultation. We were forced to choose a best fit response, as I'm sure many other respondents were, which potentially skewed the survey results. As local councillors, our opinion has been formed by talking to people in the community, by listening to the complaints we receive, and with consideration of the tragic events related to dogs we are hearing of nationally. We were therefore very concerned that the findings of the public consultation were informed by a large majority of non-residents. I emphasise non-residents. The Town Council is here for Lyme Regis residents, 54% of whom favoured dogs on leads during the winter. I'm sure that there are more, but the silent majority cannot be all accounted for. The Town Council is responsible for people who use the public areas under our management, and we want people to be prioritised over dogs. A dog off a lead is not under control, and all we are asking for is for dogs to be kept under control while using Lyme's only sandy beach. We feel it's reasonable to retain just one of our 4 beaches as a safe place for people to play, walk and relax, without fear of being knocked over by a loose dog or, heaven forbid, being attacked by an out-of-control dog. The argument that there are no other accessible places in Lyme where dogs can have off-lead exercise is simply not true. There are many other open spaces, including our other beaches, fields and bridleways which are safe and accessible. The argument that Lyme's beaches aren't busy in the autumn and winter is also untrue. The winter period will include October and February half-terms, the Christmas and New Year break, and often Easter is our busiest times. As landowner of the sandy beach, the Town Council is responsible for a public safety enforcement and cleaning. To help us fulfil these responsibilities, we feel it's absolutely essential dogs are not allowed to run loose on the beach. If Dorset Council allows dogs off-lead during the winter, will it take responsibility for public liability, enforcement and cleaning if an accident happens as a result of dogs running freely? And thank you very much indeed for listening.
Thank you very much. Now online we've got Debbie Conover. Have we? You're muted.
I thought I had unmuted. Apologies. Hi, I'll start again. Hi, my name is Debbie Conybeare. I'm the creator of Dog on Shame Lyme Regis and the Lyme Regis Loving Dog Owners, Visitors and Friends Facebook group. Thank you for allowing me to ask a question virtually today. Being a disabled resident of Lyme Regis, attending virtually makes this meeting really inclusive for me, so thank you. Okay, so my question. I fully support the initial recommendation from the consultation report point 1.7.3 to harmonise all Dorset beaches by permitting dogs off leads on the Lyme Regis Town Beach in the winter period, noting that the majority were in favour of dogs off leads. Given that officers have found the adjacent beaches are not suitable for anyone with mobility issues, it is extremely important that dogs are permitted off-lead on the Lyme Regis Town Beach to allow those with mobility issues or disabilities to have a safe and accessible space to exercise their dog off-lead as per the Animal Welfare Act 2006. Permitting dogs off leads works well on all the other Dorset beaches under the Public Space Protection Order, and to include Lyme Regis Town Beach would bring consistency across Dorset. To not permit dogs off leads would go against the majority in favour of dogs off lead and question the reliability of participating in future consultations. Should the majority be ignored? It would also go against the statement in point 1.6.1 in gaining consistency across Dorset. A dogs on lead restriction would be neither appropriate nor proportional, given the findings in point 1.7.3. That there is no evidence of significant use of this beach compared with other Dorset beaches without restrictions. For the past 2.5 years, I have taken daily photographs of the empty Lyme Regis Town Beach, which I have submitted as evidence that confirms there is no significant use of the town beach during the winter months. Given that many with mobility issues already face huge obstacles in their life, being refused to have their companion dog off lead could impact negatively on mental well-being. I ask Cabinet to please adhere to the initial recommendations from the consultation report for dogs off leads on the Lyme Regis Town Beach. This would support a harmonisation of restrictions and would provide an inclusive space for everyone, including law-abiding dog owners, especially those with mobility issues or disabilities, to exercise their dogs off lead. So my question is, what can Cabinet do to ensure that the Lyme Regis Town Beach is in harmony with the other Dorset beaches under the Public Space Protection Order to become an inclusive space for everyone to address the issues of those with mobility issues? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I should have said that when we've had all of the speakers, Laura Beddoe will give a response to all of those that wish to speak this morning on the dog issue. Next one's Richard Daw.
Good morning. I hope you can hear me. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak to the Cabinet. Since I have become disabled myself with severe mobility problems, I have realised that Lyme Regis does not have any safe, suitable places to walk my dog off lead except the town beach, and Dorset Council officers agreed with this. 54% of respondents were in favour of dogs off lead, leading to the initial recommendations for dogs off lead as per point 1.7.3 of the consultation report, which I fully support. To have dogs off lead on the Lyme Regis town beach would harmonise all Dorset beaches. It is extremely important that dogs are permitted off lead on the Lyme Regis town beach to allow those with mobility issues or disabilities to have a safe and accessible space to exercise their dog off lead as per the Animal Welfare Act 2006. Permitting dogs off lead works well on all other Dorset beaches under the PSPO. To include Lyme Regis town beach would bring consistency across Dorset. To not permit dogs off lead would go against the majority in favour of dogs off leads and would cause people to believe that democracy does not work. If the majority of respondents were ignored, then one would question what would be the point of participating in any future consultations. To not permit dogs off lead would also go against a statement in point 1.6.1 in gaining consistency across Dorset beaches. Given the findings in point 1.7.3, a dogs on lead restriction is not proportionate, especially given there has been no evidence of usage between the town beach and other Dorset beaches that do permit dogs off leads. Living with a disability is already difficult by not providing a safe and accessible space for dog off lead exercise has a severe negative effect on mental well-being, as it feels the decision makers do not care for those who have mobility issues. Please could Cabinet consider those who are less mobile to go with the initial recommendations from the consultation report for dogs off leads on the Lyme Regis town beach. This brings all beaches in line with the restrictions and will provide an inclusive space for all to enjoy. I wish to ask this Cabinet, how will you ensure the officers' concerns about adjacent unsuitable beaches are taken into account when deciding about year-round dog off lead access on the Lyme Regis town beach, as a disability doesn't just vanish in the summer? Taking into consideration those with disabilities so that we are not treated like second-class citizens due to not providing us with a safe and accessible space for dog off lead exercise. Thank you.
The next speaker is Helen Davies-Smith.
Hello, can you hear me? Can you hear me? Yeah, good. Okay. Well, firstly, my name is Helen Davies-Smith, and thank you for allowing me to ask the question that I'm about to ask. Given that the consultation report findings have led to the recommendation for dogs to be permitted to be off lead during the off-season months of the 1st of October to the 30th of April, in line with other Dorset beaches, a recommendation that I would like upheld, and that the consultation report was the result of Dorset Council's transparent, democratic online consultation that resulted in 54% voting. Sorry, my phone's ringing. Do apologise. Where are you? You've gone. A second. Rejoining the meeting.
Helen, it's okay. You can continue. Yeah? We can see you.
Oh,
so please do continue.
Okay, that's fine. I've clicked it off on my phone. That's why I put it there in case somebody did something silly like that. Right, where was I? Oh yes. Okay. So the consultation report was a result of Dorset Council's transparent, democratic online consultation that resulted in 54% voting in favour for the current PSPO restriction of dogs on lead in those off-season months to be removed. Given all of that, what would be the reason for ignoring that 54% majority, requesting dogs to be permitted off lead, as Lyme Regis Town Council seems to want? Now, I asked that question as a non-resident of Lyme Regis, and as before this PSPO, a frequent and happy visitor to Lyme, spending my money, camping, walking, and so on. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next speaker is Martin Pennicott.
Hello? Oops. Hello? Hello, yes.
We can hear you.
I'm Martin. Can you hear me? Yep. I'm Martin Pennicott, a resident of Lyme Regis. The consultation for the new PSPO stated in the terms of reference there will be a chance for all parties to have their say on where they think the restriction should be for dogs in public places. The consultation closed in August, and as stated, no further comments will be accepted. For Lyme Regis, this means going with your own officer's recommendations, and the majority of 54% who voted for off-lead on Sandy Beach in the winter months. And it is, as other people say, very, very much quieter, and it allows those with mobility issues to have access to a safe space. Alternatives are not safe nor accessible, just try them, and this will harmonise Lyme Regis with other areas of Dorset. Lyme Regis Town Council have a very negative view of dog ownership and seem to be allowing their personal opinions to influence the recommendations, which is counter to the fair result of a decent and open survey. Lyme Regis, outside of the town's council bubble, is generally a very dog-friendly and welcoming place. And many of the restaurants, cafes, shops, they're all dog-friendly. And the town council view is contrary to this and should not be allowed to sway the decision of a fair and open consultation process. So the question is, can the council confirm that all views submitted during the consultation will be included and honoured, and that any information submitted outside of the above time frame, including the supplementary information from the Town Council of the 5th of October, will be discounted and will not influence the recommended decision in any way? Thank you.
Thank you very much. The last speaker is Sean McConnell.
Hello, with thanks to the Chair for the opportunity to speak, and to the Cabinet and Council. I'm in the process of moving to Lyme Regis because it's delightful, from Derbyshire. One of the reasons for choosing this wonderful town as a place to live is its dog friendliness, in that the vast majority of shops, pubs, restaurants and businesses in Lyme welcome dogs with open arms. So my question is, what direct and documented evidence has been presented to the Cabinet which would go against the recommendation for permitting dogs off leads in winter on the front beaches in Lyme Regis? Thank you.
Thank you very much to all the speakers. I'm going to hand over to Laura Beddoe to respond, please.
Thank you, Spencer. Councillor Laura Beddoe, Cabinet Member for Culture and Communities. So I'll start off by saying that we will move to the item proper soon and have a full debate about it there. But just in response to some of the comments, some of the questions, some of the statements. So allowing a dog to foul without proper removal, whether it's on or off the lead, is an offence under the order anyway. Town Council and Dorset Council officers are authorised to serve fixed penalty notices if they witness an offence, and I appreciate that's difficult. Where dog mess remains and we get notified, then Dorset Council Waste Services will arrange to go out and clean up. The introduction of the new PSPO doesn't change that. That's really important. The other thing to consider is that dogs must not be allowed to be dangerously out of control in a public place, which means injuring someone or making someone fear they may be injured. And that applies to any breed or type of dog. and that responsibility rests with the owner. Penalties are available in situations where a dog is allowed to be dangerously out of control, even if a person is in fear of being injured, even if they're not injured. And as I said, the liability for any injury would rest with the owner. And there is compensation available if that does happen. I have to say that we are fortunate, rarely happens. Just to remind the Town Council that variations to the order can be made if we do receive significant concerns about public safety. We would always monitor dog fouling incidents or aggressive behaviour anyway. And again, this PSPO wouldn't change that. This is a really emotive subject. We've received a huge amount of engagement on this, which I'm grateful for. People hold very strong feelings about this. And, we've received impassioned, well-constructed responses and viewpoints from residents, visitors, and others. And we try really hard to give each our full consideration. We have, where it's been necessary, we've asked for appropriate legal advice, for appropriate equality advice from our colleagues, from other agencies. That's really important. And so we've arrived at the position that we're confident that the process we've undertaken to make the new dog-related public spaces protection order has been robust. We're confident that it has followed all of the required steps of both statutory and democratic processes, and that due regard has been given to the Equality Act 2012 and our public sector equality duty in setting out our recommendations. We have sought to have a fair and balanced approach. That's really important to me, so I just wanted to make sure that was said, and I look forward to debating the item. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much, Laura. That's the end of public participation. We've got questions from members. There's one question from Councillor John Andrews.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor John Andrews from Sherborne East. My question is relating to highways, and over the past few years, residents have been asking for various improvements to highways, in particular people parking in an irresponsible manner, even though there are no parking restrictions. I've explained the unusually long and bureaucratic traffic regulation order system required to put parking restrictions in place, and I know not only myself, but officers and other members get frustrated by it. Also, the cost to put a TRO through the system. For instance, an additional 20 metres of double yellow lines in place will require a TRO at the cost of between £5,000 and £6,000 and possibly 12 to 18 months. Has Dorset Council raised this issue with the Department of Transport, and could a fast-track TRO or small improvements be implemented in the example above? Thank you.
Thank you very much, John. I can't remember who's replying. Are you replying? Ray Bryan.
Yes, thank you, Leader. And also thank you, Councillor Andrews, for the question. This is quite close to my heart because of the amount of work that it involves and also the costs that it involves. Without going into too much detail, I handle a number of these every single month, all of which have had to be fully investigated. My response to you, as portfolio holder for Highways, Travel and Environment, is the Traffic Regulation Order, TRO, process is a statutory process as per the Road Traffic Regulation Act 1984. This restricts the ability to change or deviate from the current process and therefore wouldn't allow for a fast-track TRO process to be created, as the time taken to implement a TRO can vary significantly depending on its nature and the level of objections received. To ensure that the impact from the available budget is maximised, we prioritise community requests based on safety and improved network management needs. A TRO is required to be used as a last option when considering traffic management issues on the road network, and any issues should be passed through to the Community Highways team for consideration and impact scoring. The cost of a TRO is case by case. However, it is mostly made up of the advert costs, which is part of the statutory process, and the site-specific requirements for the restrictions being proposed. This can range from a minimum of £2,000 up to £10,000. The DFT is currently developing a digital approach to TROs, recently referenced in the DFT's plan for drivers, which release is October 23. We're just waiting for it, which will help reduce some of the current time-framed restrictions of the process. However, that does not go as far as to remove the need for advertising in the local newspaper, which, as I've highlighted, is a big part of that expense. Therefore, it will always remain somewhat time-bound to ensure proper process is followed. I hope that answers your question, Councillor Andrews. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much, John, and to Ray for the response. There were two other questions from members, but unfortunately they're not able to be here today, so the question and the answers will be published with the minutes of this meeting. So we move on now to agenda item 6, which is the forward plan. Colleagues will have had a chance to have a look at it. December looks a little light at the moment, but I know there are some other items to be put onto that agenda, so the next iteration of the forward plan will pick those up, I'm sure. Can we accept the plan subject to amendment? I'll take silence as yes. Right, we move on to agenda item 7 now, and I'm going to hand over to Councillor Laura Beddoe.
Thank you, Leader. So here we come to the item that has generated so much public interest. And again, I am really grateful because, quite often we discuss things here at Cabinet and at full council and in our committees. And we always, we're always longing for people to get involved. It's actually really welcome. So I am grateful to everybody that has let us know their opinions, even though on one particular issue, the Lyme Regis issue, that there is obviously that conflict. So this isn't a motive issue for this particular town, for Lyme Regis. And I'd just like to start by saying that I represent a tourist area. Part of my ward is Lulworth Cove. So, we attract large numbers of out of town, out of village visitors. So I do understand the strength of feeling where you weighing up a balance between local and visitor preferences, I suppose. So I just want to start by saying that. On the PSPO, more generally, Janet Moore and Graham Duggan sitting next to me, I'd like to thank them for their work, because this is a huge piece of work. It covers the whole Dorset Council area, and it has been a really big and really complex task. So I'm always grateful for their calm and competent and excellent work. So thank you. Also, thank you, Overview Committee, for their input, for their useful debate. I was at the meeting, and they gave this issue a really, really good airing. So I believe that it's right to ensure consistency for all people who are heading to walk on our beaches this winter. I think it's very difficult to examine and moderate all our beaches on a site-by-site basis. I think that results in considerable variation, could do, and therefore confusion. For both locals and visitors. I think consistency really is key to ensure the responsible exercising of dogs on our beaches. We don't have any evidence that Lyme Regis Front Town Beach has more family or child visitors during the winter months than other beaches do in Dorset. We don't have any evidence of increased fouling or increased dog attacks for that beach. However, I do think we should be mindful of the thoughts and the careful consideration given to this particular town issue by the Overview Committee, and to give some reassurance that the situation would be carefully monitored for reassuring people of Lyme Regis. I would like to propose that the policy, as outlined in the original officer recommendation, but with an amendment, that the amendment is that we review the Lyme Regis Front Town Beach area after this coming winter period. The reason that I would like to propose that we go with the original officer recommendation and we review after the winter, is to hope to achieve a compromise, and to give reassurance that concerns have not gone unheard. and that we will, of course, monitor how this is going. This isn't a sort of, forever thing. So the process of reviewing this policy, I think, has been at times quite difficult, quite emotional for people involved. We've had really heartfelt opinions. I really hope that colleagues will support my amended recommendation because it is a genuine attempt to reach a sensible and proportionate middle ground for all concerned. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Laura. Before I open it up for conversation with others, would I have a seconder, please, in the Cabinet? Councillor Ray Bryan.
Yes, Leader. I'm happy to second the proposal subject to the debate that goes in front of us.
Before I open it up to the Cabinet to debate the matter, are there anybody in the Chamber wish to speak on this item? Carol Jones.
Thank you. Carol Jones, Sturminster Newton, and I chaired the Place and Resources Committee where this was aired thoroughly. The rest of the PSPO went through without a problem. It was the Lyme Regis one that caused the consternation and the issues. And I think, looking back, we had a large number of representations from the Town Council. Councillor Belinda Borden was there who spoke very passionately. And none of that was countered by the opposite side, i.e. the people that want to walk their dogs on a beach. And I think that's because they saw the officer recommendation and didn't see a need to come along and actually talk to that. And I do wonder whether that would have swayed the committee, actually. The vote taken was not a majority one, and it wasn't one that I supported. So I support very much what Councillor Laura Beddoes has said, because we did come up with the idea of having a period of time, a season, where we could actually review what actually happened. I mean, do all people with dangerous dogs live in Lyme Regis? Or, we just don't see problems in other areas, and other beaches are busy. The other area that really did concern me is how on earth do we expect people to take part, participate in public surveys when we are looking to increase who we reach, how we reach them, and getting genuine feedback, if we then ignore that those people that vote in favour of something and we decide not to go ahead. So I hope Cabinet will support this recommendation, because I think it's the right way to go. And we did suggest that this actually came back to overview after the season, where we can look at it very closely. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Carol. Anyone else? Les Fry.
Thank you, Chair. Les Fry, Dorchester West, Vice Chair of Place and Resources Overview. I support the recommendation from Councillor Beddoes. I think it's a good compromise. I'll be interested to see how the review is carried out and what consultation is carried out as part of that review. But it's a difficult one to fix, and we won't please everybody. You can't have half a dog, for example. You've either got a dog or you haven't, and this is an interesting one. It's been good to see so many people taking part in the debate and part in the conversation, which we're all grateful for. So I welcome and would like to see how they're going to carry out that review, please.
Thank you very much, Les. Anyone else? I'll come back to the Cabinet in a moment. Anybody else who's not on the Cabinet? If not, I'll come back to Cabinet. David Walsh.
Thank you, Leader. Sadly, I wasn't able to come to the Overview Committee where this was being discussed, and hopefully there's an answer to my question that was brought up at the meeting. We heard from disabled people from Lyme Regis saying that if there's no suitable areas for disabled dog owners to exercise their dogs off lead in the winter, where do they exercise them for the rest of the year? And that's not meant to be argumentative. I would just like an answer. If there are no areas to exercise the dogs, where do they do it the rest of the year? This is just looking at the winter.
I'll let you. I'll keep the question. We'll let Ray, and then I'll go back to Laura at some point. Ray.
Yes, thank you, Leader. I absolutely support what we're doing, in as much as it does give us a consistent approach across the Dorset Council area. Failure to have that consistent approach will mean that people who visit from outside may just get into trouble because of a variation from one beach to all the others. And I think we've got to be very careful when we vote on this that we remain with a consistent approach so we don't confuse our visitors. As an ex-hotelier in the Bournemouth area, many visitors bring their pets with them. The local economies need these visitors. And normally, Lyme Regis is very welcoming to visitors. In fact, I would say it goes a long way to relying on its visitors for its own economy. The consultation has sent a clear message. I think it's important that we also note that residents across Dorset, a council area, go to Lyme Regis to visit, and they take their dogs with them. If we make it so that it's not a welcoming area, then I think in the winter months, which is when the economy suffers the most, will suffer even more. So I have no hesitation in voting for the report, and I'm happy to see the amendment that's come forward, which actually will help us make a decision in the future if we need to amend it. Thank you, Leader.
You, Ray. Councillor Byron Quayle.
Thank you, Leader. I found this quite interesting, particularly over the last few days where we've had quite a lot of traffic through our emails from both sides of the argument. And when this was first came up, and I was a bit perplexed. I'm not a dog owner, but I enjoy going down to all our beaches and quite happy to see dogs on beaches or aren't. But I've always been a strong believer in the views of local people. So when I received 1 or 2 emails saying that local people weren't being heard, I was quite concerned. Hence, then I looked into it and saw actually local people have been listened to. We've had surveys go out. Yes, I understand that they're coming from the committee, so I appreciate Councillor Jones's input today. But I absolutely welcome Councillor Beddoes' amendment to this, because yes, Dorset Council does listen to local areas. We do everything we can to get the view of all the people, and it's difficult because sometimes vast majority of people just don't get involved, but will still have an opinion after the fact. And that's always quite difficult. And what has been proposed today gives people both sides, literally your cake and eat it to a degree. It's driven by data, not just by the heart, and I will be fully supporting this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Byron. Any other members of the Cabinet? Simon Gibson.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to follow on from Byron's comments there, I completely agree. I am a dog owner, as it happens, although I personally choose never to walk them on a beach. But it's not about that. It's about trying to find a fair and a sensible balance. There's already restrictions on dog owners at various parts of the year. I think this is about trying to find a fair balance. There's been lots of comments on both sides of the debate about how to manage the results of the consultation. I think it's just the reminder to Cabinet that it's a consultation, not a referenda, which means, and that's important actually, it's not a case of you accept the result or you don't. These are informative. And in this case, this consultation has been very informative. And for me, what I took out of this consultation is that this is a divisive issue, and therefore a balance needs to be struck. And for me, this is a balanced position. The amendment from Laura is something I welcome because it adds further balance and the ability to change. We shouldn't be forced into a binary choice, one way or the other, because of a strongly worded campaign, one way or the other. This is a good balance and provides consistency.
Thank you very much, Simon. Anybody else in the Cabinet? Andrew Parry.
Thank you. I had the good fortune to, during the half-term break, spend a little bit of time in Lyme Regis with my young son. And knowing that this was coming up on the agenda, and knowing that we are a nation of animal lovers, and my family is as much as anybody else is, I'm sure, on this one, although we don't currently have a dog, I took the time to observe some of the dog owners in the area and how they were behaving. And clearly those that were walking along with an elderly Labrador, frankly, whether that dog's on a lead or not would make little difference. It's never going to go more than a few feet from its owners. But when you consider animal health and well-being, and then you consider a greyhound, for example, greyhounds don't need a lot of exercise, but what they do need is the space to go and have a sprint. And a beach offers that perfect opportunity for them. And by nature, others may speak of their own experiences, I've always found greyhounds to be a very friendly type of dog. They're quite reliable around children. They're often recommended as a pet in that environment. but they do require exercise. And it would be a real shame if a resident living in the Lyme Regis area who had a particular breed of dog that just requires that sprint exercise found themselves having to get in their car and drive miles away down to another beach because we've implemented a policy that would prevent them from exercising their dog locally. Now, I do understand people's concerns, and Councillor Beddoe is quite right in saying there is legislation in place to deal with owners that of breeds of dogs that would be unacceptable to be off a lead or unmuzzled in those environments. Those already exist. There is an expectation on public orders, and Councillor Beddoe's amendment actually puts in place a monitoring system that we can allow that for the Lyme Regis case. But I hope we will find that the experience of Lyme Regis, if we do adopt this policy today, is mirrored, as we've seen in other areas, where it doesn't become the big issue that perhaps some are suggesting today.
Very much, Andrew. Gary Tuttle.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I'd like to say thank you to all of the people who've emailed me and written. They've been extremely detailed arguments on both sides. I'd also like to particularly like the Town Council at Lyme Regis, who, as a long-term Town Councillor myself, albeit in Swanage, I appreciate just how much time and effort goes into being a Town Councillor, and often your opinions are not listened to, which is always disappointing. But I think in this case, we have listened very carefully. To ignore the officer's recommendation would to bring an inconsistency into the council's policy, which would be unusual. And I'm hoping that Councillor Beddoe's proposal will appease both sides with a review after this year, and so it is a fair compromise. But I'd like to thank everybody who's contributed, and I will be supporting Councillor Beddoe's proposal. Thank you.
Last word from you, Laura.
Yeah, thank you, Leader, and thank you, colleagues, for your support. Just a couple of points that came up in people's comments. How are we going to review it? I'm happy to take officer guidance on whether a paper comes back to overview or scrutiny, whatever's most appropriate. But that's the process that we'll use, and I'll take advice and guidance on what's the most appropriate route. David's point about, what do people who may have a disability do during the summer months? I think the point is that we're trying to ensure equity. And of course, in the summer months, nobody can exercise their dog off lead. So what we're just trying to do is to make it equitable. So yes, you might have to find alternatives and during the summer months if you have a greyhound and it needs a sprint, but everybody does. And I think that the point is that we want to make sure that it's accessible for everybody and that different groups, different areas aren't being treated differently. Was there anything else that came up that I need to address? I don't think so. I think, just to sum up, this is a genuine attempt at compromise. We will review it, and we're not going to please everybody, but I hope we found some middle ground today. Thank you. Thank
you, Laura. Well, members, we've had the recommendation, or an amended recommendation, proposed and seconded. Does any member of the Cabinet disagree with the amendment set out in the report? In that case, in the absence of any disagreement, the recommendations are approved. And we now move on to agenda item 8, which is over to Gary Suttle.
Thank you, Chair. Gary Suttle, portfolio holder for finance. And we'll start with the Q2 paper. So I present the outcome for the half year, which shows that we're forecasting a net shortfall of 11.985 million. And this is a further increase on that of Q1. Q2 has worsened by 1.6 million, and although disappointing, shows a significant slowdown in the rate compared to the earlier months of this financial year. You'll see from the details in 9.8 that place remains the area under most pressure, struggling with inflation and other pressures. And I refer you to 9.367. You can see the cost of travel pushing the budget out, almost doubling from one quarter to the next. We're working as hard as possible to contain the situation, but it is by no means easy, and I cannot give you any assurance at this time as the outcome for the full year. There is no doubt that the current year will require both our remaining contingency and reserves to balance the budget in the current financial year. This does not mean acceptance or defeat. We remain committed to making the outcome for the year less than reported today. As usual, there's significant detail in the report, and I'm happy to take questions should any arise. The recommendations are set out on the first page, numbered 1 to 4, which I propose acceptance of. Thank you.
Laura, thank you very much. Right, before I open up the Cabinet, any colleagues in the room? Brian and David. Brian first and then David.
Thank you, Chair. Brian Heatley from Rodwell and Wyke in Weymouth. I do notice a bit of a change in the level of optimism and pessimism in the way you introduced that, Councillor Suttle. And I've also noticed the fact that our finance officer is now saying we are in a high-risk situation. So I think you're giving us notice that this may well get worse. Can I ask a couple of specific questions? The big problems are in place. The single biggest problem of those problems in place is the overspend on travel, £7 million. Page 53 in the paper says this area is the subject of considerable focus by the senior leadership team and transformation resources. I'd like to know what it is that there may be that will make this situation better, a little bit more detail on what we might do about that. The second question is we're starting with about 35 million this year in the general fund, the reserves. Are you going to find some extra reserves from earmarked reserves this year, do you think? And if so, when are you going to tell us? Thank you.
Do you want to pick that up?
Well, let's start with travel, which you've pointed out is, which I've highlighted and which you've obviously seen. Currently, we're working, or officers are working on route optimization, and we're trying to see how we can possibly reduce, through various methods, maybe bringing more children together in travel. But it's a very, very difficult thing. And it's been difficult really since the pandemic, where obviously the children were solely brought to school, and that needs to change. And those are the sort of savings we're looking for. But at the moment, we have increasing numbers, and it's becoming more difficult. But the work that's being done, we hope we'll see some reductions in the third quarter. Certainly do not anticipate the same rate of expenditure from 1 to 3. I do expect that to go down. You asked about reserves. The 35 million is our reserve based on our safety net, if you like, percentage. There are other reserves that are available, which are unallocated, currently amount to, I believe, £22 million. And so, and in total, those are allocated 140 million. We could consider repurposing them, and if I do, you'll be the first to know. Well, you and everybody else. I hope that helps.
Thank you. I think if you could consider repurposing them, so could we. Thank you.
Good morning. Aidan Dunn, Exec Director of Corporate Development. I just wanted to take the opportunity to comment on Councillor Heatley's reference to high risk, because he's absolutely right. In this report, the officer assessment is that Dorset Council is in a high financial risk situation for the very reason that Councillor Suttle has just outlined. But I just do want to draw a distinction between our own internal assessment of high risk compared to sort of high risk nationally. Because what we're seeing in the national media is a number of councils reporting that they're in exceptionally high risk, on the brink of bankruptcy, etc., etc. So for absolute clarity, Dorset Council isn't on any of the government high risk lists for the very reason that Councillor Suttle's just described. We've got a healthy level of reserves that keeps us out of that high-risk situation. It's my message to the rest of the organisation that Dorset Council is at high risk. It's not a national perspective. But that just reinforces the point that we need to take action and need to continue to take action. And as Councillor Suttle mentioned, on homeschool transport, for example, Councillor Knock, Lacey Clark hosted effectively a summit for around about 60 staff last week from children's and from the finance team and from the travel team, looking at ways that we can be more effective of getting our vulnerable children to school at a lower cost. So very serious situation, but we're working on it. Thank you.
I talk to colleagues around the country. We've got a problem. It pales into insignificance compared to some other councils. The problem, the send travel issue is a problem across the country and it needs to be resolved. And some of it has to come, some of the solutions will have to come from central government. They can't all come from us in local government. Right, who have I got? David. David, of course, David.
Thank you, Spencer. Councillor David Gray, Raleigh-Pole, Weymouth. I aspire to be as polite as Brian when asking finance questions. I've got lots and lots of questions, but I'll try and give other people an opportunity. I've got one comment to make on the report and one big question, if I may. I thought, with the exception of the debt management section, which was, after 4 years, very good, I thought we certainly understand that now. I thought the report was long on expectation and short on the hows to get it done, is my feedback. And I do sense a change in terms, really. It's a tough read, but it is short on strategies to fix it, which is sort of my question, really. So if you look back at the last 4 years, this council has spent nearly 22 million of reserves to prop up a budget that we haven't achieved in the last 4 years and we're not likely to achieve for this year. So our reserves will shrink by over 33, 34 million in the term of this council, which isn't a great record. My view, and if you look forward in the medium-term financial plan, it's scary, 22 million next year, ranging up 28, 29, and that's important because it'll be a new council that tries to deliver that. And until this government goes, we're not going to get a change in the RSG. So my question really is, I do read the transformation stuff and I do read the savings that were made. I suppose my view is that, and I'm interested in Gary's view and Aidan's view of this, isn't it time for a fundamental change in the way we do things? Because it feels to me that we chase savings every single year at the expense of trying to do a better job. Isn't it time we went for fundamental change? A transformation or one council, whatever you call it, is not reshaping enough for us to get to a stage where we can deliver services. And we need a big change because we cannot go on like this. If you look at the projected council tax increases in the next 5 years, circa 15% in the next 5 years that the residents will have to cope with, which is, in my view, not acceptable. So I'll be interested in, my view is that we've got lots to do, but we need some fundamental change, not a reorganising of the deck chairs. Thank you.
Thank you, David. You always have a way of getting right to the nub of the issue, and you're absolutely right. We've taken £96 million so far out of the equation, but it's all gone back in. You and I can both see the importance. I've stressed the importance of a medium-term financial plan because I'll be commenting on that in a minute, because that is the indicator of what's going to happen if you don't do something, and that's why we're doing something now. Our future council paper will come shortly in the agenda. That's just stage one, and phase two will be will be a comprehensive look at process within the council. And that doesn't mean that the services will change, but but it means the process to deliver those services, I hope, will be significantly changed, and that will reduce significant cost within it. But at the end of the day, we are fighting a battle. Obviously, I can't possibly agree with you that a change of government would help, because, in fact, the truth is, a variety of governments over the years have done little to support the dire need we have within us. And you've heard me fighting, and the leader, fighting our own government, if you like, for fairer funding for this authority. Not just about money, but the way in which they look at our situation within in the UK, the ageing population, the reality of our situation, the difficulty we have to deliver services in a rural community. And that's really not acknowledged. And getting £600,000 last year rate support grant borders on an insult, but obviously we'll accept it, even if it was just repurposing money we already had. And I will stress again that until that, if you like, algorithm, the way in which local councils are funded within this country, changes, we're going to have a difficulty. So, acknowledging that that's not going to change immediately, we have to do this work through our future councils. But the way the council will look, the way we deliver services, and the cost of those services. And that is the work that will commence, not next year, it commences immediately. And that is the way in which we hope we will be able to bring what is currently a difficult budget under control.
Thanks, Gary. Anybody else?
Thank you, Spencer, and thank you, Gary. I just wanted to comment, we'll be discussing this later in the agenda under the One Future Council item. But I agree with David and I agree with Gary. But I'm concerned, and I hope after this meeting I'll be less concerned, that people are underestimating what we hope to do with what we plan to do with the Our Future Council work. This isn't a shuffling of deck chairs. It is a fundamental shift in the way that we do things as an organisation. Because David is right, we can't not do this. But this piece of work that Jill and Gary and I are jointly all leading on, coming under Jill, but we're all working together on it. This is fundamental. This is huge. It's not simply a paper. It's not a piece of work. It's across the entire council. And I'm really concerned that people don't underestimate what we want to achieve with this, because I would be more worried about what Gary's just said if we were not already planning for the future in this way and being really ambitious with the scope of what we want to do, because we've got to do it. We've just got to do it. So I just wanted to offer that. Please don't underestimate the work that we're doing. It's profound. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I go to Ray, can I let Shane come in? I probably just missed him when I...
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, it's an interesting report and in many ways a worrying one. On page 44 at 9.5, the report talks about volatility around ministerial offices making policy setting difficult. Obviously, that could have a potential cost implications to the council authority. We know that at the moment with Westminster in all sorts of directions, that it's making life for local government difficult. And I agree with Councillor Suttle that it has been a succession of governments over many, many decades that have led local government authorities into this position. The recommendation to note the Q2 forecast outrun, at 2, the identify priority areas for change and to be made to close the in-year budget gap, and at 3, to agree that the portfolio holders will work with officers to continue to identify and develop further in-year efficiencies and savings to minimise reserves. I would suggest that there is a scrutiny role in that as well. And I'm a little bit disappointed that scrutiny hasn't been a part of this. The risk dashboard is being modelled and the performance dashboard doesn't currently go into the level of detail or content to date to inform and direct scrutiny where it should be investigating, particularly over these types of financial matters. We know that within place, and we've seen that drift within its budget, Obviously, with the inflationary pressures it got, and with the construction costs it's got, and there is reasonings as to why that has taken place. But scrutiny should be keeping a watching brief concerning the council's finances, and it should be live. I do have the ability to call in the documents and the papers. My scrutiny committee does have that ability. And so could I discuss with the portfolio holder and the Section 151 officer outside of this meeting, please, along with my vice chairman? Thank you.
Jane, do you want to comment or not? Take that on board.
Yes, we're happy to do that. And frankly, any support is always welcome. Thank you.
David, I don't normally take second questions from members, but I will let you come in, but if it's a quick question.
Okay, I'll call it part B of the first question. In answer to Gary's question, it is inevitable. In the report, 21.2, page 80 is the most important paragraph in that report, and that's why I'm saying that there's a change of language, because it's almost that we've suddenly realised that whatever we're doing isn't fully going to work in terms of bringing us under financial stability, and we need to be radical next time. My second question really is, again, about phrasing. Your cabinet strategy, point 1, says we shouldn't be using reserves to fill the gap or to affect a balanced budget. After 4 years and now a 5th year, I'm sort of saying we need to do away with that point. It does allude to in the report that we need to do it, but actually putting it in the report, it's meaningless because we haven't achieved it. And I know there's an intention there, but we need to find a different way of saying to enable financial stability, we may have to, because saying that we're not going to and then doing it every year is not a good way for a council to act, in my view.
Yeah, well, first of all, some of it in the last few years have been absolutely minimal amounts, although you are semantically wise, you are correct, digging in. But that's what it says. Yeah, we won't reserve. That is the policy, and that would be our intention, always our intention, not to use it. But I will stress again that, and as Councillor Beddoe has highlighted, we fully acknowledge that it doesn't work as it is and that it has to change. And that's what we're doing. And that's why we're bringing that work now, as soon as we possibly can, and enabling a team to look in the entire processes of a council, not just, it's so easy to say, well, we'll cut a bit of library or we'll cut a bit of this, cut a bit. We're not going to do that. We're going to look at the fundamental processes of delivery within this council, right from the bottom to the top. And we are going to make significant savings where possible. But it still doesn't get away from the fact that we're doing this because the council remains underfunded. But we are doing this work because we have to. And as you say, we have to do this work, not for us or for the residents, because that's why we're here. And the council tax has always been important. We've tried to keep it down last year. Clearly, that's not, you can see that that's not going to be possible this year. You don't need a crystal ball for that. And the work that I envisage being carried out from now on will deliver results.
Right. Ray.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. I've listened very carefully to some of the comments that are being passed, and I think we need to make sure that people understand the purpose of reserves, because the reserves are there when we have the unexpected that we need to deal with. And in the last 4 years, and I'm not going to go on about the pandemic, because that obviously caused us some issues, but we have to look at the real facts, and that's that inflation has caused us some problems. When you're restricted on what you can put the council tax up by, and yet inflation is way above that, that obviously creates a gap. I think I need to defend some of the actions that we're taking and make sure people understand. I've got a hedge-to-hedge review going through in my own portfolio, which goes to performance next week, and that will show a better way of working at a lower cost. And that's something we've been putting together over the last 4 years since I first raised the subject. And of course, built into that is the preventive maintenance units, where if we prevent the maintenance, obviously it's work we don't have to do in the future, which will actually save us money. I can't let this pass, because I think we also need to point out that on the home to schools transport, we have come under tremendous pressures, not just caused by inflation with the cost of fuel rising tremendously, drivers' wages rising tremendously. These are bits that are out of our immediate control. But I've got to say, Councillor Knocklacey, who's leading the team, and thank you, Aidan, for highlighting that, but we mustn't forget that behind him is a big team led by Matt Piles, who is looking at every possible way in which we can restructure. And I'm also going to mention that this is a national problem. It's not just a problem for Dorset. As I talk to other councils around the area, they are all experiencing tremendous pressure on the school to needs. I think it's also important, if I may, Leader, that I highlight the fact that, and Aidan did mention it briefly, we have got teams now working together, and as Aidan mentioned, 70 people sat in a meeting the other day discussing ways in which we can resolve these problems. This is us working as one council, and I take my hat off and my thanks to both Children's Services and Adult Services for coming to the party so that we can resolve this problem going forward. I wanted to just raise those points, Leader, because I don't want negativity to overrule some of the great work we've done.
Byron?
Thank you, Leader. And just building up on something that Ray has just mentioned, and following up on the question point B part about not using reserves out of our policies. Again, it builds on what Ray mentioned about what reserves are there for, of course. However, it also talks about culture. We've seen across the country councils that have a poor culture of dealing with issues run themselves into considerable problems. And if we were to remove some of that wording, could that build into a culture here? Tough decisions are being taken. This council are taking these decisions. Millions have been saved over the last 5 years. More needs to be done, we know that. But it goes to a culture of dealing with the issues, tough issues as they are. And Councillor Suttle has been quite direct at pointing the blame at some areas. None of us would probably disagree with that. But I'm talking on culture here, and the culture in this council is to get on with the job and deal with the issues, as tough as they are.
Thank you, Byron. I'm going to move on now because we've got other items on the agenda to talk about the medium-term financial plan and how we're going to deal with transformation in the future. So I've had this proposal proposed and seconded. So I'm going to look at the Cabinet now. Does any member of the Cabinet disagree? Recommendations set out in the report. In that case, in the absence of any disagreement, the recommendations are approved. Now go on to agenda item 9, which is the medium-term financial plan, and I'll hand over to Gary again.
Thank you, Chair. I feel that we've already done this, but in a way, but I will do this anyway. So I present the medium-term financial plan for your attention, and I'm afraid it flows from a previous report and is more of the same. As always, the medium-term financial plan requires a little crystal ball work and depends on inflation predictions, and of course there are different opinions. However, as set out in 10.5, it is not unreasonable to assume 3.2% for 24-25, although we all note that inflation is not coming down as fast as has been hoped. Set out in 11.4 of a current forecast for coming years, they do not make encouraging reading and really underline the work to contain this council's financial security continues right now, and in the coming years we'll be working on numerous projects of reorganisation and transformation, looking at both internal and possible external options. What the MTPF does, and why I often refer to it more than in year's budget, is it gives the early warning system, but only a fool ignores. It says do nothing, and at the very least this will happen to you, and hence the work programmes that are current and those to come to ensure that the figures in 11.4 do not come to fruition. Recommendations are set out on page 1. I see we've gone to Roman numerals, but I interpret these as 1 to 8, which I propose acceptance of. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. Have a seconder. Ray, will you second this, please?
Say no.
Oh. Somebody doesn't want me to speak. Now, I'm happy to second this, Leader, and obviously we'll be interested if there's any comments from other people.
Thank you, Ray. Comments from Brian and David.
What my colleague in front of me said about that first assumption on the reserves, couldn't we make some acknowledgement in the statement of the assumption that it's something we haven't done very well with in the preceding 4 years? I mean, it looks so weird to put it there when you know that we simply haven't done it for those first 4 years. Can I make a second point? We tend to concentrate in what we do on the net budget. That is the money we've got to raise by council tax and business rates and so on. What we spend is the gross budget, and it depends also on our fees and charges and on the grants we get from government. One of the things that struck me immediately when I looked at the assumptions page here was that we had a higher assumption for inflation than the assumption for the increase in fees and charges. Now, I think we just have to be hard about this. If it's costing us more to deliver the services, then we ought to be putting our prices up. And I don't understand why we shouldn't just follow through that general line. Secondly, we don't make any assumption in here about grants. Now, that may be something to do with our negotiating position with the government. I don't know. No, that may be. But perhaps we should be saying what we need here. At least it may be a large number which we realistically know we're never going to get. But it's an opportunity to say, the way we need to fund this council, we need a lot more money from you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Heatley. Just a couple of quick observations. So this paper's medium-term financial plan is at a point in time with sort of 3 months to go, sort of the final budget setting before budget comes to Cabinet and then full Council. So we've made a series of assumptions at this time and things change. I think just quickly on fees and charges, I think our planning assumption is that fees and charges will be increasing around about 5% generally, although we're trying to contain inflation. We've modelled it at 3.2%. We know that many of our suppliers will be experiencing inflation higher than that, but we're going to try and contain it through our contract management approach. Secondly, your point about grants from government. Last year, when the settlement was announced in December, late December, the government gave us an indication not only of what the level of grants for this year would be, but also for next year. So we have got a series of grants assumptions. We haven't got into this level of detail in this paper, but obviously will be available in the final paper. But you never know. We're sort of waiting to hear on Christmas Eve any final allocations from government as well. So there's a range of movement that's can yet happen. But essentially, as this paper highlights, a budget gap at this stage of between 22 and 23 million. We're working our way, trying to move our way through that, and with the principle as sort of laid out, saying we don't intend to use reserves to plug that gap. But I think ultimately, if we do get to that place, then we'd need to formally acknowledge that in the Cabinet and full Council budget paper.
Picking up your point about we ought to tell government, so on page 1 of my letter to Michael Gove on the 3rd of October, which I believe has been shared with members. So I've done that. we recognise the need for a certain level of funding, Brian, revenue support grant or retained business rate or whatever it comes in, that we've acknowledged. Gary said this many times, that apart from what we can do for ourselves, there is still a fundamental underfunding from central government to this council, and I have to say most other councils too. So we're not alone in this. Right, David Taylor.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much for letting me ask some questions. Surprisingly, I've been looking at the fact of the overview completely from the outside and saying the fact is we have a tremendous skill gap within the groups, which could be filled by the councillors that already sit on the table. So 82 of us are looking at this and saying, you know, we've got strength in our cabinet to actually give you financial advice and information, having worked in the financial sector myself for a few years. So there's a wealth of information to say, how can we, as councillors, help you? Because it seems to be a pathway that's very difficult to get towards you to actually give some advice and help you. So therefore, that's a question to you to say, are you actually listening to all the members as well and all the councillors? Because we could help.
Picking up on that point, I'll pick that up, David, because we've got budget working groups, which is something that was an initiative that came from scrutiny, and we've got the budget cafes. So there's quite a lot of opportunities for members across the chamber to get involved in the process of building our budget, because you know the cabinet not the preserve of all ideas. There'll be other ideas from people like Brian and yourself and David. So you know we're open to listen. That's why we have those cafes and we have the working groups. So I think there's plenty of good conduits to enable members across the chamber to contribute. Simon Christopher.
Thank you, members. When we reflect on what has happened post-COVID, Mr. Heatley should bear in mind that 3 years ago, on the 6th of November 2020, the price of Brent crude was $39.5 a barrel. Now it is more than double that. And I commend Councillor Gary Suttle for all the work that he does in this difficult time when we try and deliver services in a rural area, which is incredibly difficult. We talk about risk. We've heard a lot about risk this morning. There is high risk. There would be a risk of a change of a council and a change of a government. If you read the papers at the weekend, you will have said that you will have read the Chief Executive of Crest Nicholson saying that Labour's policies won't deliver on housing. And I don't want to sound like a broken record, but I have spoken before about the issues of the delivery of housing. And this is the great challenge for Dorset Council. It's been mentioned by Councillor Fry, and it's been mentioned a few minutes ago, perhaps by Councillor Taylor. That is the great problem for Dorset Council, and we should not forget that. But you have to remember that financially, we're not living in a vacuum. And it could be, Councillor Heatley, that the Chancellor on the 22nd of November doesn't just produce a leveret, he produces a large rabbit out of his hat for Dorset Council. But in the meantime, I commend Councillor Suttle.
Thank you, Simon. David Gray.
Follow that. Rabbits and all. I'm just choosing which question to ask. Can I ask Aidan about the technical override? I don't quite understand that because with the DSG, I've been asking questions for a number of years. It's getting worse and worse and worse. And I know we've got this technical override in place. I sort of asked the question, if they yanked it after the end of the period where we're at risk, is it time we started to provision for, I know it's a negative on the balance sheet, but is it time that we provisioned in reserves something around the DSG just in case? Taking it back to my Simon's previous point about the volatility and the change of government that's coming, maybe that will disappear. So can you just explain what a technical override is and whether we should provision in the reserves for the gap, because it doesn't look like it's getting any smaller. Thank you.
Okay, I'll give an officer answer. There might be a political commentary as well. So we have spoken a few times about this, but education budgets are funded separately from local taxpayers' money. We are spending more than the government is allocating us on these education budgets, in particular around children with special educational needs. Therefore, we're overspending, and the deficit is building up and up and up. We've reached agreement 2 years ago with the Department for Education under this safety valve deal, where they contributed to the deficit as long as we did as well to start pay off that overspend. Those plans haven't gone as well as we'd liked for a number of reasons, as the rest of the country are experiencing as well. So we're currently in negotiations with the Department for Education about extending the period of that deal, and those negotiations are live. In accounting terms, what that means, at the moment, the deficit, we don't include in our accounts. We don't have to, because there's a statutory override. So the statutory override ends in April or March 2026. So there is a scenario in April 2026 where we suddenly have to account for that deficit in our books if the statutory override isn't extended. So at that point, I would hazard a guess that there's a whole range of councils across the country that would find themselves in a really challenging financial situation and effectively not solvent. So this is a really serious national issue, and there's conversations going on at the highest levels about this. But there is a scenario where that could happen, and the question is, how does Dorset Council remain solvent? So Councillor Suttle mentioned earlier that we've got reserves of around about £140 million at the moment. So technically, we could sort of repurpose those as an accounting treatment, and that would keep us solvent. But I think your point about whether we need to start setting aside funding now to cover to prepare for such eventuality is one that we're having as a live conversation within the finance teams and politically. I think the absolute challenge is one that you've highlighted earlier. We've already got a significant challenge in our current budgets, in the council budgets, and those funded by taxpayers. So we'd have to make even more efficiencies and cost reductions elsewhere to generate that reserve. And that's the balance that we've got to work through. So Gary, do you want to comment?
Yeah, it's a tricky one, this one, David, mainly because if you remember, originally this was going to come on our balance sheet in 2024. And it was a significant concern then, and that's why we entered into the safety valve deal. I describe the safety valve deal as neither good nor bad. It was catch-22. It was a significant offer of money, but it wasn't enough. But if you didn't take it, what would you do? There was no alternative. In 2026, April 2026, government have said that this will come on to our balance sheet, and that is currently the legislation. However, if we look nationally, one of our neighbours, for example, would be facing a £500 million adjustment, which would instantly bankrupt them. And as we understand, that would be the same case for so many councils around the country, but it would not be prudent for any government, whoever that government is, to try and enforce that, because they would then have to pick up the tab for all of those councils. So I can't see them bringing it at 2026, but we're aware of it. I think I don't think there's a week goes by, Aidan, that it doesn't come up and we discuss it, because it's sort of the elephant in the room. It really is a significant repurpose of all of our budgets available to us, and it would be a significantly damaging event to us if it's put on us. So to say we are acutely aware of it, and it just sits behind us like the prophet of doom, if you like, and no one really knows what we're going to do about it, because it's a national issue. And nationally, no one really has found a way of controlling it. And so that's why we sort of believe that whichever government is in place at the time is going to have to provide a national solution. We hope. But that's where we are. But to say, you know, I want to be absolutely straight, but it's not something that we can forget, obviously. It's behind us all the time.
Right, Shane Bartlett.
Thank you, Chairman. In part, Aidan answered my question, but I'd still like to make my point, and there is a question at the end of it. I think when we did scrutiny back in January, I think one of the recommendations was to ask yourself and the Portfolio Holder for Finance to continue pressuring government about the financial settlement and to ideally have it in October. And I noticed at 10.7 at page 71, the Chancellor is going to his autumn statement, they believe, on the 22nd of November, which will give an indication of the settlement. So I suggest this 151 officer and his team are probably going to be eating their turkey in County Hall again, as they did last year, with it coming in so late. And I think when you read that first line in that, there is currently no clarity over the length of the settlement the local government might expect in national expenditure decisions is really disappointing. I think as a council authority, and you know my views on this, Chairman, I think as a council authority, I think we've performed really well. I think that there has been that ethos, I think, of a cross-party working across the chamber. I think this council, with everything it was faced with, doing the unitary bit, getting us over the line safe and legal, and then putting all of that right, and dealing with the pandemic that we had, I think the council's performed well. But it's not helped by a government that will not face the reality situation that financial settlement has to come in October. And not only that, it needs to be a 3 to 5 year settlement as well, in my view, so that you can do that strategic planning for the future. So my question is, Chairman, I know that you have a relationship with Michael Gove and you are pressuring government, but do you have any indication yet as to whether government is actually listening? And I know this government's coming to the end of its term, because the situation of local government authorities up and down the country is a consequence of the fact that local government cannot make strategic plans over a 3 to 5 year term. The fact that we run on a year-to-year basis is quite ridiculous. Thank you, Chairman.
I think the answer is government listen, but whether they actually then respond in a positive way to dealing with some of the structural problems we've got financially across the sector is another matter. I'm quite clear that we're not going to see any multi-year settlement this side of a general election. That was made clear to me and my colleagues, leaders around the country. What will happen in the settlement, we'll have to wait and see. I hope they're listening, because the sector is very short of funds for a whole host of reasons, mainly pressures that we've got no control over. And we'll have to wait and see what the outcome of that is. But certainly I can tell you that the LGA, the CCN, the DCN, this council, individual council leaders all across the country have written letters after letters to the appropriate people like Gove and the Secretary of State, the Chancellor of the Exchequer and others, putting the point across. We can't do any more lobbying than we've done. You make a really good point. I don't think the government are in any doubt that the sector needs further funding and can't rely on continued efficiencies and the local taxpayer in the longer term. So, do you want to add anything to that, Gary?
What I will add is that the only glimmer of hope, I suppose, the government have given us at all is the second home possibility of the second home money, additional rates, council tax. But obviously that won't save next year, that will be the following year. And that could be somewhere between 7 and 10 million, so long term that will help. But at the end of the day, Councillor Bartlett, I realised some time ago that we're not going to sort our budget out by waiting for the government to help us. We've got to sort it out ourselves. And this future council work will be the method to sort it out. We can write all the letters we like, but I don't think I do believe they listen, and I believe they understand. I just don't think they have the money to sort it out, because it's such a vast problem. It's not just us, it's the entire country. Every council you talk to has the same issue. Lack of funding for adults, lack of funding for social services, lack of funding for school transport, lack of funding for education. It goes on. So if you think they're going to save Dorset Council with a magic wand, that's not going to happen. We have to create our own. And the work that we're going to do is the game in town. That's the thing that's going to save us, by reorganising internally and creating our own balanced budget from within, in my opinion. That might not be politically very good, but that's the way it is, and that's what we have to realise.
I should have added that Simon Hoare MP did ask a question in PM's question time a couple of weeks ago, particularly around funding for the shires, and got a response from the Prime Minister on that. Quite a positive response, I thought, actually. So I don't think it's been missed. We just have to wait and see when the settlement as to whether, having heard that they might actually do something in support of the local sector. So, Cabinet colleagues, the proposal has been moved and seconded. Any other comments? Or does any member of the Cabinet disagree with the recommendation? In that case, in the absence of any disagreement, the recommendations are approved. So we move on to agenda item 10, Council Tax Reduction Scheme. Gary.
Thank you. Hopefully I'll run out of voice in a minute. The last year, I think everyone in the council chamber acknowledged the need to help those most in need and vulnerable. And today, this paper attempts to assist that further. For many years, we've offered a scheme for working age applicants that only allows a maximum of 90% award of council tax support, meaning that for anyone in and out of work and of working age, they would be expected to pay 10% towards their council tax. And we see this as challenging for those in the most difficult positions. It's never been an easy scheme to administer, having to obtain so much information and then calculate the relief. And today we propose to expand the scheme to the full 100% for those who most require it. I'll refer you to the grid at 3.18. It's also very important to stress that the 100% happens automatically for anyone who receives benefits. That's set out in paragraph below the grid. This support will apply up to Band E of a council tax, and our assessment that this will be a significant improvement. The scheme is quicker for claimants, it's fairer, and supports those most in need. And I recommend the scheme to you. And I'd like to thank Katie Hale and the team for what is one of the most significant improvements to our council tax benefits scheme in many years. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. Seconder, Simon Gibson. I think it's all pretty straightforward, and I think it's good news, actually, for those that do require that little bit of additional support. The Cabinet are not indicating they wish to speak, so does any member disagree with the recommendations as set out in the report? In that case, in the absence of any disagreement, the recommendations are approved. Move on now to agenda item 11, our future council, Jill Haynes.
Marvellous. Finally got the mic. Thank you very much, Leader. Councillor Jill Haynes. I'm a councillor for Chalk Valleys, and I also have the portfolio for corporate development and transformation. And this paper is an update on our future council transformation programme. And although there's been quite a bit of information out this for councillors, I suspect you've all thought not a lot is happening. But there is a terrific amount happening in the background with this. And I thought that's why one of the reasons, particularly on the back of Gary's financial papers, was really essential that you understood the amount of work that's happening in the background and how we're likely to be making big changes in this council and how we're likely to be bringing this information and involving you as we go forward. So Dorset Council has a proven track record of successfully implementing transformation initiatives. We can see that with the convergence of the 6 councils, leading to significant savings and improved efficiency since it was formed in 2019. And through this process, we've learnt many valuable lessons and now considerably better intelligence across the breadth of the business. The purpose of transformation is to fundamentally change and/or redesign systems, processes, and services across the organisation. These initiatives have amounted to some 96 million in savings to date, and yet the continuous inflationary pressures means that this is still not enough to keep our budget balance going forward, and further change is needed. In December 22, the Council recognised that the current transformation ambitions required acceleration to increase the scale of efficiencies and financial return to support a balanced budget, and commissioned work to accelerate the transformation through our Future for Council programme. The primary goal of this programme is to bring about sustainable change and to create a streamlined, digital and unified customer experience, resulting in better outcomes at a lower cost. It's very easy, and actually what happens in many other councils, to do the salami slicing. We can't cope with this, therefore everybody will make savings of 10% across the board. But that actually isn't fair to the public, and that actually doesn't serve us as a council. That's not what we need. And to be quite frank, it's taken longer than I would have wished. And the delay has been due to the in-depth review of processes that we've had to take to understand actually what happens within the council. It's a very large and somewhat unwieldy organisation. And before we start to make changes, we really need to understand who's doing what and how it works. Phase 1 is well underway and accelerates the delivery of the council ambition to be more responsive, customer-focused council. This will deliver whole organisational one council change by taking a customer-focused approach to redesign services. The council will improve the customer experience and increase efficiency for how our teams operate through a rapid expansion of its use of digital tools. Further efficiency in how we work will be created as functions are consolidated and aligned. As part of this work, we will look to pull the council tighter together, including joining up services or functions to achieve economies of scale. We have already agreed our newer business intelligence strategy and use the data in decision-making, and this will be a vital part of our future council work streams going forward. I've already said we must change our processes, so phase 2 will be looking further forward. We must make hard choices in order to be able to keep within the budget. And we need to make these choices with our eyes wide open, and we need to make them quickly. We will look to reimagine and redesign our services to ensure that we can keep up with and help control demand. The phase 2 work will include working closely with partners and our communities to develop a shared vision for the future and to develop a shared future for the way that the council should evolve. We must keep to the fore our priority that we will be responsive and customer-focused council. So this is work in progress, and there will be further updates and regular updates coming before Cabinet. I didn't speak earlier, but I have to agree with everybody who has said, Councillor Suttle, Councillor Gray. Fundamental changes are needed within this council, and they need to be dealt with quickly. So therefore, I look forward to bringing papers to Overview Committee for how we will be making some of those changes, because those will be changes in our policies. Some of the changes we can just kick on. We just need to get on and do them. But I will be reporting those back to Cabinet. So I refer you back to the recommendations on this. There are 5 recommendations. Do you wish me to read them out, Leader? No, you're happy with that? That's all I have to say. Propose the recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jill. Gary.
Yes, happy to second this. This is absolutely fundamental to the budget process, and it's fundamental to the actual survival of this council financially. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. Comments, anyone? David?
Thank you, Spencer. Given my previous comments, you'd expect me to say I fully support this in terms of the vision. Can I just make a plea, though, that in sort of developing the plans that we get to some of the nitty-gritty of value for money, debt management, which I think needs to be a lot tighter. I know we've started, but it needs to be front and centre for cash flow purposes. A more commercial approach, because we say it, but we're not. and we need to be much more. Gary said something very interesting, which first time I've heard it, which was, if we wait for central government to sort our problems out, we'll be waiting a long time. So our destiny has got to be within our own hands, and I do see this as the vehicle for achieving that. So value for money, debt management, commercial, a smaller council, collection rates, insufficient contingencies, all those sort of nitty-gritty operational things need to be included in the vision, probably stage 2, I would think, document. Thank you.
Do you want to comment on that, Jill?
Yeah, I would. Thank you, Leader. Absolutely right. Those are all of the areas that we need to be concentrating on. But I should also say, you did mention a smaller council, and yes, it does need to be smaller. There might be some areas that need to be bigger, because there are some areas where we actually have the possibility to make more money if we're a bit bigger. So I don't want everybody to think that shrinking it just means we do less stuff. It means that we do stuff smarter, and that we're actually looking at how we can do this in a constructive way.
I totally agree with that, Jill. Anybody else? Cabinet colleagues, the recommendation has been moved and seconded. Any comments from anyone? Andrew?
Thank you. I'm just conscious that we've had many conversations today about our own reserves and our own services and everything else. But I'd also say that I hope somewhere in the conversation we're having highlighting the space for our towns and parish council authorities to step in. Many of those are very well financed and have considerable capital reserves, cash reserves, and services available to them. And I'd like to see that space. I'd also have to say there is, of course, an awful lot that we do that I think under scrutiny might sit better with some of our partners, such as the Health Authority, and perhaps there's a space for them to contribute and help us in assisting with the delivery of services.
Thank you, Andrew. It's true to say nothing's off the table. We've got to have that fundamental look at what we're doing to make sure we come with it, you know, what we do is affordable. And Jill says some will get bigger, some will clearly get smaller. Any other comments?
It won't be on the table. I'm selling that.
Apparently Gary's selling the table, so it won't be on the table. We'll move on from that sort of humour. Any member of the Cabinet disagree with the recommendations? In that case, in the absence of any disagreement, the recommendations are approved. We go on now to agenda item 12, Byron Quell.
Thank you, Leader. Byron Quell, Councillor for Blandford Ward, Portfolio Holder, Children, Education Skills and Early Help. I'll be speaking to expansion of funded childcare offer from April 24. Speaking to the report, Leader, which is an overview of the implementation of the new national expansion of funded early childcare offer from April 24. Members will likely recall the Chancellor in the spring budget statement announced a phased rollout to offer 30 hours free childcare to every child over the age of 9 months, with working parents being phased in from April 24 until September 25. It is important to the Council because local authorities have a duty to secure, so far as reasonably practicable, childcare provision for children aged 0 to 14 and up to 18 for the year for children with disabilities. This report and recommendation seeks to ensure compliance with statutory duties and any subsequent related statutory guidance to ensure there is sufficient childcare for working families. It also sets out the implications to the local authority and how Dorset Council will support this important sector. I'd like to note, Leader, that this has already come through the People and Overview Scrutiny Committee on the 17th of October with the recommendation that this approach is adopted. Due to us having a long meeting today, Leader, I would therefore propose the recommendation in the paper. Happy to take any questions.
Very much, Byron. Do I have a seconder? Andrew, will you second it? Thank you very much. Just a comment at this point? No? Any other colleague wish to speak? Will I come back to the Cabinet? I can't see any indications. We've had the recommendation proposed and seconded. Any disagreement on those recommendations? In that case, in the absence of any disagreement, the recommendations are approved. Now go on to agenda item 13, and it's Byron again.
Thank you, Leader. As it's a roll-on from the last one, I won't give my details. Speaking to the adoption, care experience and protected characteristic. As a council, elected members, we are all corporate parents for all of Dorset's children in care and care leavers. And we are truly blessed to be part of such a fantastic, different and dynamic family. As such, we have a duty to ensure that the children and young people that have been in our care receive the same opportunities that we would want for our own children, again, because they are our children. Unfortunately, it is far too often the case that people with care experience are more likely to face disadvantage and discrimination, not just here in Dorset, but across the country. As an ambitious council with high aspirations for our care experienced young people, making this a protected characteristic will remove barriers to success and importantly is in line with the recommendations from the independent review of children's social care. The review concluded that this would provide greater authority to employers, businesses, public services, and policymakers to put in place policies and programs to improve outcomes for care experienced people. I totally agree with that. At this time, the government has not yet committed to doing this. However, there are over 50 councils nationally who have adopted a care experience as a protected characteristic, including Devon and Cornwall, which is in our region. As good corporate parents, we want to do that here to support our care experienced young people. Again, as noted in the report, this has already gone through People and Health Overview Committee on the 17th of October with the recommendation that this approach is adopted. I would therefore propose that the recommendations put before you today are taken up.
Thank you very much, Byron. Do I have a seconder? Simon Gibson.
There we go. I'm delighted to second, Chairman. As an organisation, we know perhaps better than most the structural challenges that our care leavers face. And I think that this is a good show of support for those and the people working with our care leavers, and I hugely welcome it.
Thank you, Simon. Anybody not on the Cabinet wish to comment? Mark?
Thank you, Leader. Yes, I'd just like to support this recommendation as lead member with special responsibility for children in care, and knowing the difficulties that some of our care leavers have in obtaining both employment and housing and rental discrimination. I think this would give just the added status to the care leavers, and I was well, 2 Fridays ago at the Southwest. I took part in the Southwest sort of a summit on this, and hearing from other councils and how it was helping their care leavers. I fully support this.
Thank you very much, Mark. My Cabinet colleagues, recommendations have been proposed and seconded. Anybody got any comments? Ray.
Thank you, Leader. I'm going to support this, and the thing that really does get my attention is on page 140 of the report, when there's a comment from one of our young people, and that really has got my attention focused on what we need to do going forward. And when we have things like this in our reports, it must absolutely sway our thinking as to the ways forward. So I'm going to be supporting this, but as I say, if people haven't read it, I draw their attention to page 140, where there's a comment from one of our young people. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ray. Andrew Parry.
Thank you, Leader. And as you know, I have a long history in wanting to work and support our children in care. But what I have observed, I think really underpins the necessity for us to adopt this policy, has been the changing nature of the children in our care. You know, literally a couple of years ago, the majority of children we talked about originated in the Dorset Council area. as we sit here today, a sizable number are now placed in our care as a result of being part of a national dispersal programme. Therefore, their requirements will change. And on top of everything else that they have faced, I know that there will be a residual prejudice against them as a result of them not originating in a particular area. And we have the opportunity here through this piece of work and adopting this policy to challenge that and to ensure those young people who've been in our care, as has been the case of all young people in our care, have the best possible future going forward.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Anyone else? Byron, you want to come back?
Apologies, Leader. I actually should have said it in my opening statement. I also wanted to just bring attention to some of our officers, Paul Dempsey and Kay Wright, who are great champions for our care leavers. And if you've ever spent any time with the two of them, you will know just how, well, watch my words correctly here, how passionate they are in supporting our young people. And I actually just wanted to name check them, although that they were on the report as well. And just to thank the work that they do, because they really do offer hope at times to some of our care leavers.
Well said, Byron. Anybody else? Right, the recommendation posed and seconded. Anyone disagree with the recommendation? In that case, in the absence of any disagreement, recommendations are approved. We now go on to agenda item 14. Ms. Byron.
Thank you, Leader. Speaking to item 14, the Families First for Children Pathfinder delivering the government's stable homes built on love strategy. Again, Leader, I referred to this item once before when I spoke about the Pathfinder programme and just how big an opportunity this was for Children's Services and Dorset Council. That position hasn't changed. Being able to present this item today speaks to the amount of hard work our officers and councillors before me have put in to get Children's Services to the great place it is today, and the trust, and this shows the trust government has in Dorset Council. Following on from the National Review of Children's Social Care, the government has written a new strategy, Stable Homes Built on Love, with 6 pillars or themes for transformation. Dorset, along with 2 other local authorities, have been invited to test out an element of the strategy. This paper provides an overview of the approach the Council is taking to implementation, outlines governance and sets out the required tasks and timelines for the programme to move forward. Noting some points, we are asked to develop a model of provision to deepen integration and partnership work in family help and child protection services, to make greater use of wider family networks to support children, and to enhance the role of education as a safeguarding partner. The DFE are supporting us with funding to the tune of £4.5 million between now and the end of 24-25. We have worked with partners and used children and family feedback to co-design our model, which is an enhancement to the strong multi-agency locality model we already have in place. And we have submitted our model on the 31st of October. We are now working on a detailed implementation plan and hope to start delivering some aspects of it from December. Again, Leader, I noted that this has already gone through the People on Health Overview Committee on 17th of October with the recommendations. I'd also like to note, Leader, and I did this last time, it seemed incredibly unfair for me to be presenting this today because the work in Children's Services to get Children's Services to the good position was clearly done with many, many officers behind me and my predecessor, Councillor Andrew Parry, and I seem to be stood here with the glory to present this, and I find that incredibly unfair. But I just would like to thank them and Councillor Parry for all the hard work over many years. This is a great opportunity for Dorset, and I'm so thrilled that we have this opportunity. I would therefore propose the recommendations as put forward to you today.
Thank you very much, Byron. Andrew Parry.
Thank you, and thank you for those generous words from Byron, as always. I mean, look, I'm very, very happy to second this report. And I think when I look at the journey of children's services in Dorset and in the Dorset Council, it started with Blueprint for Change, which under Theresa Levy's careful stewardship and guidance was delivered successfully. And that is as a blueprint, not just for children's services, but for other things that we can deliver inside Dorset Council. It's certainly brought us to the forefront, and it's delightful when you hear people talking nationally about the Dorset model of children's service. What an accolade for us to have. That reinforces our good with outstanding leadership Ofsted rating, and it has been a team effort in the delivery of it. The objects of Pathfinder are superb, and they're values that we all have. My own personal upbringing, I know, was in a family full of love and support, and I would wish that for every child. But I do say this as a nearly 50-year-old with a 93-year-old mother. You are never too old to get told off by your mother when you do something wrong.
You're seconding the yes. Before I open up to the Cabinet, I know David Taylor wishes to speak.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you very much, councillors. An excellent presentation. My passion for foster care has been through my entire life because I was in foster care from all my childhood. So the fact is I know exactly what job you are doing, and you are doing an outstanding way of going forward. I've followed this with great passion throughout the years, and I've been involved with the adult services and children's services as well. And looking at the Mockingbird project, outstanding. People are talking about it all over Facebook, I can tell you that. And it is an outstanding result what we're going forward with. But I wanted to just thank you very much for what you've done. It has been amazing. And we as Dorset are noticed, I can tell you that, from Central and everywhere else. But again, thank you, and I support this wholly. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, David. Mark Roberts.
Thank you, Leader. Excellent proposal, excellent report, and thanks all the officers for the tremendous work put into this. I would just like to refer to 3.4, that the expectation that the department will continue and the expectation of a higher increase for children's services. And I would like to feel that we will continue to work with government to ensure that this happens. Thank you.
Point well made, Mark. Thank you. Right, Cabinet colleagues, recommendation has been proposed and seconded. Anybody got any further comments? In that case, in the absence of any disagreement, recommendations are approved. Let's move on then to agenda item 15. David Walsh.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, I'm Councillor David Walsh, portfolio holder for planning, and I represent the Gillingham ward. The Chesilbank Neighbourhood Plan has been subject to independent examination and referendum. The purpose of this report is to formally make the Chesilbank Neighbourhood Plan 2022 to 2032 part of the development plan for use in planning decisions in the Chesilbank neighbourhood area, incorporating the villages of Portisham, Abbotsbury, Langton, Herring and Fleet. Now, the Council held a referendum on the 28th of September 2023, with the area covered by the referendum being the civil parishes of Portisham, Abbotsbury, Langton, Herring and Fleet. This is the same area to which the neighbourhood plan applies. In the referendum, 167 people voted in favour of the plan, with 55 people voting against the plan. The turnout was 19.8%. Due to a regrettable error when administering the referendum, one polling district was inadvertently excluded. This meant that 35 residents who could have chosen to vote were unable to do so. This error only came to light just before the polling stations were due to close, and we are aware of 2 residents who tried to cast their votes and were unable to do so. If all 35 residents affected by the error had voted against the plan, this would not have altered the outcome, but it is important that all of those entitled to vote are able to do so. Letters of apology were sent out to each of the residents concerned. The reasons for the mistake have been identified and steps taken to ensure that it cannot be repeated in other referendums and elections. I've held this post as Neighbourhood Plan Champion Chairman for 12 years, and this is the first time I've ever heard of anything like this happening. And I'm totally confident that this will never happen again. But where a referendum result is more than half those voting in favour of the proposal, the Council must make the plan as soon as reasonably practical unless it considers that this would breach or be incompatible with relevant environmental regulations or human rights requirements. So, Chairman, I put forward these recommendations that the Council makes the Chesilbank Neighbourhood Plan 2022 to 2032, as set out in Appendix A, part of the statutory development plan for the Chesilbank neighbourhood area, and that the Council offers its congratulations to Chesilbank Parish Council and members of the Neighbourhood Plan Group in producing a successful neighbourhood plan. Thank you.
Thank you, David. A seconder, please. Jill?
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, I'm very pleased to support this. I think it's I think the most important thing is to just say how much work is involved in getting this to this stage. So a big thank you to all the people involved in it. Thank you.
Mark Roberts.
Thank you, Leader. As most of you know, this is indeed my ward, probably the best ward in Dorset Council. And a very large amalgamation of 4 parishes who move their parish council meetings between all 4. And indeed in Fleet, we meet in the church, which I think is quite unusual for parish councils, and it has no heating. But since I was elected to represent this ward, there has been a report at every single one of those parish councils by the neighbourhood plan group, by its chairman, and the amount of work that has gone into this and the support of the very large parish council has been superb, and I fully support it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mark. Right, Cabinet colleagues, been proposed and seconded. Any comments other than that? I would just make one remark, and that is that I'm always so impressed by the quality of the work that goes into these neighbourhood plans. There's a huge amount of time and commitment that goes into those that get involved. I did have a good look at this one, and I was really impressed. So, in the absence of any disagreement, the recommendations are approved. Now move on to agenda item 16, the Wiltshire Local Plan, and David Walsh.
Thank you, Chairman. In September, Dorset Council received notification of the Regulation 19 consultation on the Wiltshire Local Plan. This is the final consultation stage in the production of the Wiltshire Local Plan prior to submission to the Secretary of State for examination in public. As such, it is important that a response is made to the consultation so that Dorset Council is able to demonstrate engagement in the production of the Wiltshire Local Plan as legally required by the duty to cooperate. It is agreed by both councils that there are limited issues of strategic nature that affect both local plans, and as such, discussions have focused on where cross-boundary issues exist. Since the earlier consultations, Dorset Council have taken control of a strategic education site to the east of Shaftesbury, known as Coombe House School. This site provides teaching for children with special educational needs, and as such, is not open to the general public. Within the Wiltshire Local Plan, the site is designated as an open space and play facility under Policy 84, Public Open Space and Play Facilities. This policy seeks retention of these spaces and their enhancement when development takes place. The policy is not relevant to Coombe House, as the sports facilities exist to serve the school rather than the public. The policy is therefore not relevant to this particular site, and we have recommended that the designation be removed. I therefore put forward the recommendations as seen, as proposed.
Thank you very much, David. Can I have a seconder, please? Seconded by Jill Haynes.
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, I think it does seem completely mad that we have an open public space when we're running a school, and there was a school there before, so I totally support this comments going through to Wiltshire. Thank you.
Thank you, Jill. Any comments, anyone? Back to the Cabinet. I don't see any indications of colleagues wishing to speak. So in the absence of any disagreement, the recommendations are approved. Move on to agenda item 17, Blandford Waste Management Centre.
Thank you, Leader. You get it in the end. Thank you. So, colleagues, this paper is by way of an update on the financial situation and land acquisition plans for the new Blandford Waste Management Centre. We've also included the details of the proposed compulsory purchase order, which I'll refer to as CPO, to be progressed if we aren't able to complete negotiations, I suppose. So the recommendations are to note the financial position and the progress, and to agree the draft order documents. It's all attached to the paper. We've redacted financial, commercial sensitive information. This is a really important site. It's been an awfully long time in the planning. HRCs and waste transfer stations are not simple to deliver, and they are not quick to deliver. And this one is no different. In terms of the negotiations, we have been negotiating, I haven't, officers have, over a considerable amount of time, and we haven't reached an agreement yet. We want to continue to try to progress that into a place where we can agree, but we also want to have the CPO, if you like, as backup to make sure that this can happen. So this isn't simply a household recycling centre, it's a waste management centre, transfer station. It's important for our business continuity, our business resilience, that we have this. Currently, Blandford is served by an HRC that really is not suitable. The detail, the background is in the paper, but it's not suitable going forward. The financial situation is that the finances are all accounted for. We have sufficient funding to do this. And at a strategic level, it's really important to the whole of our waste management across Dorset Council area. Really is quite a critical site. So you have all the information in front of you, and happy to take any questions. And by that, I mean that the excellent Gemma Clinton is here, and she will be happy to take any questions because she's led the team that are looking at this. And obviously Jason has written the report, Jason Jones has written the report. He has come to previous meetings to talk this through. A huge amount of work done by both of those officers, and I commend them for it. So thank you, Leader. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Laura. Gary.
Yes, very happy to second this. This is a significant improvement for Blandford. By repurposing budgets, it's going to have a neutral cost to the current finances, and therefore support it fully. Waste is one of those that are subjects that always makes people extremely vocal. And I think the residents of Blandford have every right to complain about the site they have, and this will be a great improvement. And I thank Gemma and all the team for the work done. And this is a tool, if you like, to make this happen, because it should have happened already. It's been delayed, and this will make it. This will speed the process up, I believe. I hope.
Thank you, Gary. Any comments? Sherry?
Councillor Sherry Jesperson, Hillforts Upper Tarrants Ward. I'm pleased to see this paper here. I'm pleased to see this making progress. It's a really important piece of infrastructure, this, for Blandford and all the surrounding villages. It's been a very long time in coming, and local people are very, very supportive of this initiative. It's a thing that Dorset Council has offered that local people are very keen that we should get on with. I get asked about it 3 or 4 times a month, I would say, that not in a hassling way, but just because people are really keen to know that we're getting on with it. So yes, please do, all power to your elbow, and let's get this delivered as soon as we possibly can. Thank you.
Thank you, Sherry. I'm back to the Cabinet now. Byron. Oh, sorry, Mark, and then Byron.
Thank you, Leader. I would just like to echo all the comments made and how valuable this will be, having lived through the determinations of the establishment of the Bridport Recycling Centre, and now that it is such a well-used and valued facility. I know the residents of Blandford will benefit from this.
Thank you very much, Mark. I do remember those days as well. Byron.
Thank you, Leader. Not wanting to disagree with Councillor Roberts. As the Councillor for Blandford, the best ward in the country, in the county even, I fully support this. It's been a long time coming. Councillor Jesperson said that she gets asked this all the time. I live just down the road from the current tip in the town, and this is a top priority for the whole area, not just Blandford. So absolutely support this.
Thank you, Byron. Any other comments? If not, the recommendation is proposed and seconded. In that case, in the absence of any disagreement, the recommendations are approved. Now move on to agenda item 18, Weymouth Regeneration and Levelling Up Fund. Simon Gibson.
Good afternoon. Councillor Simon Gibson, portfolio holder for Levelling Up and Economic Development. I'm pleased to bring the latest paper regarding the Levelling Up Fund bid in Weymouth for consideration. I'm delighted to be joined by Julian Wayne, who's our strategic property advisor, who's been leading the team and doing a lot of great work in getting the Levelling Up Fund bid to the position we're in today. But Chairman, given the sad news that we heard this morning, I also wanted to add my own personal thanks to Tony Ferrari for all of the work that he had done in getting us to this stage when it comes to levelling up. Tony was fundamentally important in securing the levelling up funding from government and has taken us to a great state that we're in today. And I just wanted to say thank you to him. And as we go forward, I'll always be mindful of the work that he did on behalf of Weymouth at the time that he served so well. The report is an update report. It's asking for 4 things in the recommendations. In particular, I'd like to point out 2 and 3. 2 is asking for £3.5 million of match funding. This was committed to during the bid process, but now is the time for us to progress that. And then 3 is asking for a change from the original bid that we put into DLUC. As always with a scheme of this size, it takes a long time and things change. One of the things that's become apparent in the work that we've done up to date is that we would like to consider some other options, and we'd like to formally request of the department a change to allow us to move some of the money from the allocated sites around New Bond Street to the Weymouth Bowl site and potentially some other sites later. So we're seeking permission this afternoon from Cabinet for that. The report is quite self-explanatory. We have another report coming early in the new year, which will set out a lot more detail. But for now, Julian and I would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Simon. Do I have a seconder? Andrew Parry?
Just to very much echo Simon's comments there in respect to the memory of Tony and the fantastic work he did as part of the Levelling Up and the excitement he had and we all share in the delivering of the Levelling Up agenda for the Weymouth area.
Thank you, Andrew. David Gray.
Thank you, Spencer. David Gray, Ward Councillor for Radipole in Weymouth. I support this paper. I particularly support item 3, which is the movement of the money from Bond Street, and that was only built 25 years ago. It shouldn't be the priority for redevelopment, so I support that. My plea, if I may, on page 339, please can we not achieve short-term capital gains and revenue streams through high-quality commercial and residential development at market value? As a financier, that sort of sticks in my throat a little bit. So please can we not do that? And please can we support the long-term regeneration of the town as a major focus? This is a strategic intervention and therefore it needs to be a longer term. Whilst we can take some cash in the short term, I think what we need is a vision. And I think we're there, but I'm just making that plea as a Weymouth councillor that we look at the long term. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Simon, do you want to comment on that?
I will do. Thank you very much. David, I agree with a lot of what you said, and I've been grateful for something that is mentioned in the report. We commissioned some work by Professor Tony Bavard to try and do exactly that, to try and give us some vision around what is achievable, both short-term and long-term, for the sites. And I agree. And there are some competing interests, of course, on a site as important as the sites in the Levelling Up Fund. But we really want to make sure that it does exactly that. In the report, it talks about some of the short-term things we can do. Item 18 in particular talks about that. And actually, the good news is I think we've made some good progress in that. But I am mindful of that long-term thing to make sure that Levelling Up isn't just a short-term win for Weymouth.
Thank you very much, Simon. Mark Roberts.
Thank you, Leader. I just wanted to echo and emphasise the importance of these recommendations. Speaking here as Chair of the Harbours Advisory Committee, which of course is central to many of the aspects of the regeneration of Weymouth, in particular the North Quay and the Peninsula. And you will remember that we approved our harbours strategy, that the key points were thriving harbours at the centre of their community, and this Levelling Up intends to build on that asset that we have, that wonderful asset at Weymouth. So fully support.
Thank you very much, Mark. Anyone else? I'll come back to the Cabinet. I'll come back to the Cabinet now. Laura?
Thank you, Leader. A comment rather than a question, really. I support this paper. I just wanted to say thank you to Simon, actually, because quite often when we prepare and are given large amounts of money, or there are bids, or there is economic regeneration, or there is something like this happening, culture gets forgotten. And actually, culture is a significant driver of economic regeneration. It's really, really helpful. And Simon has met with me and David Lockwood from the Arts Development Company. We think we might be able to unlock some further cultural-related government funding through potentially working together. And I just think for me, it's great that actually in something like this, in an item like this, in an ambition like this, that the cultural sector is actually recognised as being able to contribute. And so I think this is a really exciting opportunity. I'm really happy to support. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Any other Cabinet colleagues? Well, the proposition's been proposed and seconded. So if any member disagree, so in the absence of any disagreement, the recommendations are approved. Move on to agenda item 19 now, portfolio holder reports. I've had a number of reports in. You know, they're always very useful to go on the website. Gives colleagues in the chamber a chance to see what's going on, and it's also the public get to know what the Cabinet members have been doing in the last month or so. Right, agenda item 20, there are no urgent items. So I'm now going to go into exempt business. And I need to read, for the benefit of those online, in accordance with section 100A, brackets 4 of the Local Government Act 1972, to exclude the public from the meeting for the business specified in items below, because it's likely that if members of the public were present, they would be disclosed to them and exempt information as defined in paragraphs 3 and 4, Part 1, Schedule 12A of the Act, and the public interest is withholding information outweighs the public interest in disclosing the information to the public. So I now wait for the external stuff to be turned off.